Jose Mourinho is one of very few coaches in football able to earn the highest wages and dictate his contractual terms. Even if Mourinho's place in that group is largely now based on past reputation, it still means that any club hiring him must factor in the heavy cost of sacking him before his contract expires. And potentially this is the situation at Tottenham Hotspur, where an underwhelming season has placed Mourinho under significant pressure. But would it make economic sense to sack Mourinho, and more importantly, how much would it actually cost to let him go? It's reported that Mourinho's contract earns him around £15 million a year and runs to the end of 2022-23. Now that means that Spurs would have to pay £30 million to part ways with him at the end of this season, and that doesn't include the cost of sacking Mourinho's coaching team either, if that were to happen. Mourinho has held 9 jobs in management, including his present role. His record in terms of trophies is extraordinary, but he's also left most of these jobs before the end of his contract. Now that's not always been a sacking, obviously. Porto received a reported £1.7 million when Chelsea signed Mourinho for the first time, and Inter Milan received a then world record fee of £6.8 million when Real Madrid made him their head coach in 2010. And the phrase mutual consent is also ambiguous. When Real Madrid wanted rid of Mourinho and Chelsea wanted to appoint him, all parties agreed to the switch to avoid the reported £19.6 million fee in Mourinho's contract. If Real had sacked him, they would have been liable. If Chelsea had poached him, they would have paid. And if Mourinho himself had broken the deal to join Chelsea, he would have had to stump up the funds to buy himself out. But when Mourinho left Chelsea in 2015, he and his coaching team who departed with him were paid £8.3 million by the club. And the cost to Manchester United was even higher, a reported £19.6 million. So how does it end up costing so much to get rid of someone who is apparently underperforming in their job? Well, the simple answer is that it's difficult to know without being aware of the detail within a contract. And in any case, football managers are in a strange position where their contracts are concerned. Generally, when someone joins a new employer, they receive a contract which may have time periods factored in for salary raises and will almost certainly have a probationary period and a notice period. They won't, however, have a definitive end date if it's a normal employment contract. But football managers and players are unusual in that their contracts are time limited. It's more like being a contractor, brought in to finish a specific task, but of course managers and players or clubs themselves are often renegotiating these contracts to secure their assets for longer. This affords clubs a certain amount of protection. Should another club want to buy a player, it means that part of the fee will be a reflection of how much longer that player would have to stay at the selling club. But with managers, it leaves clubs vulnerable to hefty severance payouts unless contracts are written up with specific clauses inserted. For example, failure to be within the European qualification places at the end of the season could result in a manager being sacked without such a payoff. The issue for Spurs, and any club employing someone of Mourinho's standing, is that the coaches themselves can largely dictate their terms and avoid such clauses. The pool of elite managers is small, which puts them at an advantage in negotiations, and they are rarely available for very long. Because of this, clubs are always in a trade-off. They want a big name, but that brings costs at the time of appointment and potentially further down the line too. So far, this season has seen relatively few managerial changes, with only Slaven Bilic, Frank Lampard and Chris Wilder leaving their jobs. But with managerial churn very much part of the Premier League norm, combined with Mourinho's own recent history, Spurs must have known that this was a possibility. Of course, the opportunity cost of not sacking Mourinho could be higher, but it's hard to say. These costs include lost revenue, including competition prizes, and even more hard to quantify, the cost of missing out on players who might otherwise join Spurs. There is also the effect of the downturn in form and morale of the current Spurs players, perhaps even the desire of some unfancied players to leave. Would all of these theoretical sums exceed the reported £30 million plus cost of sacking him? It's very difficult to say, but it might be a question that Spurs and Daniel Levy have to ponder in the future.